Good afternoon. My name is Emily Weimer-Skirch, and this is the presentation of my signature project, Stage 2. This proposal seeks to identify the effects of flexible seating on ADHD children for on-task behavior. Some background information for you. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and is one of the most common mental disorders affecting children, causing them to experience inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. These traits can directly affect the child's ability to learn and remain on task throughout the school day. Studies show that ADHD students can present more time on task behaviors when they're supplied with a flexible seating option. For those of you who are new to flexible sitting, this just means providing them with an alternate seating option outside of the traditional desk and chair method. These alternative options give students the opportunity to make small, non-disruptive movements during their instruction time. The problem in this study will address ADHD students' time off task behaviors during their classroom instruction. And the purpose will seek to show that when these students are provided with flexible seating options, they can and will produce more time on task behaviors, improving their overall academic success. Some data that you need to be aware of is that 1 in 11 children ranging from ages 4 to 17 is diagnosed with ADHD, which is 1 in every 15 elementary age students and is approximately 6.4 million children. This is 42% increase over the past 8 years. On the right, you can see from the EEG that the child with ADHD shows an underactive frontal lobe. A hypothesis on this says that the hyperactivity seen in children with ADHD is a way for their bodies to compensate for this underactive frontal lobe. These movements help to generate more dopamine in the brain, improving their focus and alertness. Research was done in a classroom environment and monitored ADHD children's movements using a kinetic device on and off their prescribed medications. This research proved ADHD children not on medication had significantly higher bodily movements per minute than when unmedicated. The data provided here shows an increase of students diagnosed with ADHD, the differences in their brain function, and the reason behind their need for bodily movements to increase their time on task behaviors. This project suggests children need a school-appropriate outlet for their movements, which will help enhance time on task behaviors. Student achievement will recognize that children with ADHD need to make small movements, and we can provide them that with a controlled, non-disruptive environment using those flexible seating options. Research on this topic shows that on-task behavior, attention, and productivity immediately increase when flexible seating options are present. In any good research proposal, an action plan needs to be made, ethical considerations, and a timeline need to be produced in order to make an effective research project. The population in this particular study is at a private school. This population will consist of children diagnosed with ADHD from kindergarten to 5th grade. They come from a middle to high socioeconomic status and live in affluent communities. The population is predominantly white, with few minority groups represented. The school is 56% male, 44% female. And because private schools, students are provided a limited number of resources for special needs, the population produces on or above grade level academic abilities. Private school delivers a population with small class sizes and a limited number of students with confirmed ADHD diagnosis. The sample group will be approximately 10 children per grade level, kindergarten through 5th grade. Evaluation and observation will be conducted on about 60 students of varied races and genders. We will use stratified random sampling for this study. The sampling technique that we will use will be conducted through a quantitative study using a time on task observation chart. Stratified random sampling used for this study will consist of 2 subgroups. The subgroups will be separated by grade level and then chosen based on the proportion of male to female children diagnosed with ADHD within those subgroups. Since our population sample is not very large, we must increase our chances of representativeness. The role of the participants and impact on participation, students will be provided an alternative flexible seating option, giving them the opportunity to make those non-disruptive movements, increasing their time on task behaviors. Students will be provided with explicit instruction from their classroom teachers on how to use their flexible seating option appropriately. Teachers will review the rules and guidelines with the students for using their seating option to prevent the misuse of the seat. Informed consent must be obtained from parents or guardians since they are minors, and students could misuse the flexible seating option, potentially harming themselves. In order to protect the identity of the students, all participants will be assigned a random number, so their identity will remain confidential in the results. In front of you, you will see the consent to participate documentation. These copies will be provided to parents of students asked to join the study. In any research proposal or project, there are variables. Children with ADHD diagnosis will be monitored initially using the traditional desk and then given the opportunity to use their flexible seating option. These are the independent variables in the study. Evidence will be collected using an observation chart. That will be the dependent variable, and it will document specific behaviors of the students in 30-minute increments throughout the instructional day. The hypothesis is that students diagnosed with ADHD will show immediate improvements for time on task behavior when they're provided with a flexible seating option. Here you will see an example of the time on task observation chart. Observers will be trained to use this specific chart during reading lessons throughout the day. You will notice also that there are specific behaviors that students with ADHD tend to present when they are in a traditional desk seating, such as spacing out, talking out, being out of their seat, touching their peers, playing with objects, looking around, having their behavior redirected, and fidgeting. Observers will mark every time they notice a student on task and off task within those 30-minute intervals. The timeline for this proposal, this research project, consists of first identifying the students needed for the study, giving them random stratified sampling using a number generator, training observers on how to use the time on task observation chart, and having them let them have the opportunity to evaluate one student each day throughout the process so that we can have consistent results. Students in the baseline group will be observed using the traditional setting first and then the flexible seating option afterward. In order to be able to use these flexible seating options, students will be required to return an informed consent form signed by their parents or guardians before that portion of the observation. Both groups will be observed during a 90-minute reading block in the classroom every day. The observers will document the time on task behaviors during the reading block on the observation sheet over a 4-week period. After 4 weeks of observation, the researcher will compare the quantitative data for each student and evaluate if the time on task behaviors improved with the flexible seating option. Reliability and validity of instrument. The observation chart has been used in special education departments within various school districts to identify specific behaviors exhibited by a student in a classroom setting. This chart provides us with a visual, quantitative data representation of on-task behaviors. Data characteristics could provide a threat to the internal validity. To prevent this, we will use the same data collector throughout the study to promote consistency in the scoring. Observers will be trained in the meaning of each time on task behavior and how to identify it in students. Each student will be provided with their observer throughout the study for consistency. Subject characteristics may also pose a threat to internal validity because we are recording observations on a wide range in age of children. To prevent this, teachers and students alike will be provided with the same rules, expectations, and guidelines when using their flexible seating option. Classroom teachers will work with special education teachers and therapists to discuss the proper implementation of flexible seating options for these ADHD students. Teachers will have the opportunity to decide which options work best in their classroom environment and using their knowledge of the students participating. Special education teachers and therapists will input which options might be the most effective for students while they work in their general education classrooms. Collaboration throughout this research is essential to understanding each student and which interventions will help them succeed throughout the study and the rest of their school careers. Results from this study will aim to provide further information to classroom teachers, special education teachers, and therapists on which in-class interventions are most effective for increasing time on task behaviors for ADHD students. Classroom teachers, special education teachers, and therapists working together to help these students cope with their diagnosis through interventions and implementations can impact future ADHD students within their school and beyond. This study will improve these time on task behaviors by implementing the flexible seating in the classroom, allowing them to make these non-disruptive movements, stimulating their frontal lobe, influencing their ability to produce time on task behaviors. In order to see student achievement growth, we would have to see a noticeable difference in time on task behaviors when utilizing flexible seating options. After further reflection, I would change the amount of time indicated for time on task behavior from every 30 minutes to every 30 seconds. Originally, I thought that observing students over an entire day would be beneficial, but shortly after realized that these behaviors are better observed over shorter periods of time. I believe this will give us a better idea whether flexible seating is effective for creating these time on task behaviors. Further research could be done on the effects of flexible seating and time on task behaviors for all students rather than just the ADHD child. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about flexible seating and its effect on time and task behaviors for ADHD students.